A warm welcome again to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. We begin in Russia, where President Vladimir Putin has accused the West of stoking conflict in Europe and for escalating the war in Ukraine. President Vladimir Putin also announced that he was suspending his country's participation in the New START deal with the United States. Here's more.
This would be President Putin's first major speech to Russians and to the world this year, and was one in which he spared no insult to the West and heaped an abundance of praise on the Russian military forces fighting in Ukraine.
Нескрываемой ненависти со стороны киевского режима, верил и ждал.
He told members of the joint houses of parliament that Russia faced a watershed moment in its history, directing his speech to the military elite, telling them the fight between the Ukrainian government and the Donbass region was forced on Russia and that the people had been calling for help. He warned Russians overseas to beware of what he called the West's wolfish habits, and that the dependence of business owners and managers on unfriendly Western governments posed a grave threat and danger to Russia. He said that to the West, Russians were and will remain second-class aliens, regardless of their wealth or which titles they bought. Regarding the war in Ukraine, President Putin said Russia will never yield to Western attempts to divide its society and that the West was supporting traitors who opposed Russia's actions. He thanked Russians for their courage and resolution in supporting what Moscow calls a special military operation in Ukraine. And since he understood how difficult it was for relatives of Russian soldiers who had died fighting in Ukraine, he would provide them targeted support with a special fund. He claimed that the West had long started making Ukraine anti-Russia, particularly in the 1930s, rise of Nazi Germany, but that efforts were also continuing to weaken, decimate and destroy Russia. Flanked by 4 Russian tricolor flags either side, President Putin claimed the West was threatening Russia's very existence with the Ukraine conflict. In a speech lasting nearly an hour 20 minutes, President Putin said he was suspending Russia's participation in the New START treaty, a bilateral treaty between the United States and the Soviet Union on the reduction and limitation of strategic offensive arms. The New START treaty was signed in Prague in 2010 and came into force the following year and was extended in 2021 for 5 more years just after President Biden took office. It caps the number of strategic nuclear warheads that the United States and Russia can deploy, and the deployment of land and submarine-based missiles and bombers to deliver them. The Russian president's State of the Nation address was shown on numerous screens across Russia and Crimea. Moscow's Rivera shopping mall to the south of the city center used 4 of its screens to show the address and quotations from the president.
Mr. Secretary, Putin announced today he would suspend collaboration with New START. Do you have a reaction, and do you see this as a...
Now, Russia's decision to suspend participation in the Nuclear Arms Control Treaty is irresponsible, so says U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
Unfortunate and irresponsible. The announcement by Russia that it's suspending participation in New START is deeply unfortunate and irresponsible. We'll be watching carefully to see what Russia actually does. We'll, of course, make sure that in any event we are postured appropriately for the security of our own country and that of our allies.
Now, at least 1 rocket slammed into a busy street in southern Ukrainian city of Kherson today, killing 6 people as President Putin delivered his speech marking a year of the war in Ukraine. Military and city authorities said 12 others were wounded in the attack. A correspondent on the scene said shortly after the blast left a pool of blood on the pavement beside a mangled bus stop. It also damaged a line of shops and in front of a bus stop, took down power cables and shattered windows on the opposite side of the street. And just more on that story, multiple rocket launches were going on as the president of Russia gave his speech today. Let's speak to the VOA's Anna Chernikova, who joins us from Kyiv. Anna, great to see you. What has been the response of the Ukrainian government since the speech by President Putin?
Good evening. Well, we don't really have a particular official reaction yet. I guess that we are expecting this sometime soon and maybe a bit later. Probably President Zelensky will mention something about this in his evening speech. Of course, we don't know, but for sure. But it looks like that the reaction will come. What I can say that nothing new was said by President Putin in terms of in regards of Ukraine and the war in Ukraine. So for the moment, I don't really think that it was, any particularly news-making speech. So President Putin just mentioned once again, all the statements he usually uses to describe the war which is happening in Ukraine, Russia-Ukraine war. In terms of but of course, the world's reaction and Ukraine's reaction would be on the treaty question, the nuclear treaty question, and of course it's a serious, something serious to discuss. But again, we are waiting for the reaction to come. Anyway, this speech do not really change much in terms of how the situation, the war situation and battlefield situation will be ongoing in Ukraine in the next months.
So, Anna, although he does mention Ukraine in his speech, he makes no direct reference to the country. In fact, he doesn't even mention President Volodymyr Zelensky or address him or address the war directly. What do Ukrainians feel about, Western allies being accused by Russia of making the war worse because of their interference or intervention?
Again, this is something that, this is the rhetoric that Russian Federation is using, and President Putin himself using, and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia using. So we can clearly see that Russia is trying to demonstrate that this war is not only war between Russia and Ukraine, but so Russia just trying to demonstrate that everyone is actually participating in the fight, even physically. But I mean, again, President Putin was kind of, accusing West of this war, and that this war is happening, which is quite, well, it's quite difficult to really analyze, considering that Russia is the country that attacked, and Russia is the country that created this, kind of reason to attack. So, and Ukrainian society understands quite well, pretty much understands why President Putin is doing this, because it's definitely that this so-called special military operations that was supposed to end in 3 days is now lasting for a year, and definitely Russian Federation cannot say that, okay, we are losing to Ukrainian soldiers or we are losing to Ukrainian people. The rhetorics would be that we are losing to the whole world, because the whole world is against us. And actually, he was kind of, accusing the West to participating even physically in this war, so with weapons, and it was like slightly, behind his word that basically everyone is participating in full. But this is just the rhetorics of Russian Federation, and again, it's nothing new. It's nothing new that was said. This is something that we already heard before, and Ukraine also understands that and understands why President Putin is saying this, because we didn't, in his speech, we didn't hear anything about any success of Russia in this war or anything like this, or like big wins or victories or anything like that. So the concentration and the main, the main concentration was on the fact that Russia is basically outstaged, and Russia is fighting against everyone.
Yes, and there was a lull in the attacks in Ukraine from yesterday, and that's attributed to Joe Biden's visit to Kyiv when he met with President Volodymyr Zelensky. And then there were Russian missiles today in Ukraine. Do we know the parts that we hit and how much of a damage was caused?
Yeah, today was, so I should say, first of all, that shelling continue across the country. But especially we see the most difficult situation in terms of the shelling we see in the south and in the east, definitely. And today, very bad shelling happened in Kherson, in the city of Kherson. We know for the moment we have confirmation of at least 6 people killed and 12 people wounded due to this attack. Attack was targeting, unfortunately, residential areas and kindergarten and critical infrastructure facilities, but also one of the hits was at the bus stop, and the main victims are actually from the bus stop location, because there were a lot of people there at that point of time. And this is probably the worst shelling for today, but we should not also forget about Kharkiv region, because Kharkiv region is moving, well, at the moment has moved, has become, not moved, but become a kind of a pre-frontline zone, because very heavy fightings are happening in the Donetsk region, and Kharkiv region is bordering Donetsk region, and we see a lot of shelling in there as well. And particularly today, the city of Kupiansk, which is very close to the city of Izum, and it was also liberated by Ukrainian forces when during this liberation, big liberation of the Kharkiv region months ago. So yeah, unfortunately, these things are happening, continue to happen, and people continue to die. But again, the hottest spot of this war at this point of time at the battlefield is Donetsk region, and the city of Bakhmut, and around the city of Bakhmut, the main battles are happening.
Yes, and Anna, just before this week, as we came into the week, Ukrainian officials have been warning of a major offensive by Russia, but it does seem that that offensive has already taken place. Do you think that there are more attacks ahead? Are there signs that there are, and what's the President Volodymyr Zelensky saying about this?
Well, first of all, offensive, it looks like that offensive has already started. At least Luhansk region and Donetsk region is very active in terms of battles, and it's definitely that the concentration of Russian forces in that areas is huge. And well, according to official Ukrainian information, information from military and from general staff, we can say that counteroffensive, the new assault by Russia is ongoing already in that areas, at least. And in terms of attacks, well, Ukraine this week, so on Friday, the 24th of February, would be 1 year since the beginning of full-scale invasion, and of course Ukrainians expect massive shelling. This is for sure, and Ukrainian authorities and military officials also prepare the society that 23rd and 24th of February might be 2 most risky days. But again, the whole week is kind of, a week which is expected to, expected some big shelling, some massive shelling to happen. For the moment, we don't, so today and yesterday, it was more or less calm. If we take the whole territory of Ukraine, but again, the date is upcoming, and everyone is getting ready definitely for massive shelling. So we will see how will this be. But well, unfortunately, it looks like that the risk is pretty high and very high for this particular days.
Anna, thank you so much. It's nice to hear music in the background there. Something different from the silence we've been hearing during your reporting. Thank you again for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
U.S. President Joe Biden was welcomed into Warsaw today by his Polish counterpart Andrzej Duda. Two leaders met to discuss collective support for Ukraine and for Biden to express gratitude to Warsaw for its assistance in delivering military and humanitarian aid from the United States and other countries. According to President Duda, According to Duda's foreign policy advisor, the men also plan to discuss Poland's security as well as the allocation of resources to the transatlantic military alliance in the area. President Biden arrived Warsaw late on Monday following a visit to Kyiv where he met with President Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky is currently seeking increased weaponry as Ukraine prepares for a spring offensive against Russia. Biden aims to reassure its allies that the United States remains firmly behind Ukraine and is committed to bolstering NATO's eastern flank in light of the upcoming anniversary of the Russian invasion. However, a group of activists from Poland and Ukraine gathered outside the Warsaw Hotel where President Biden was staying to call for F-16 fighter jets to be sent to Ukraine. The demonstrators chanted F-16 to Ukraine and they displayed a banner with the same slogan outside the hotel as the U.S. president left for his meeting with President Duda at the presidential palace where he was met with the military honor guard. Just a few streets away on Roman Dmowski roundabout in the center of the Polish capital, a giant advertising screen ran the slogan, "Biden give F-16 to Ukraine," said it in English. Officials have urged U.S. Congress members to press the U.S. President's administration to send F-16 jets to Kyiv, saying the aircraft would boost Ukraine's ability to hit Russian missile units with U.S.-made rockets. The Biden administration says the United States should focus on providing weapons that can be used immediately on the battlefield rather than fighter jets that require extensive training, but they did not categorically rule out providing F-16s.
Natomiast my z tego miejsca zwracamy się do niego, że słowa, gesty solidarności, wyrazy troski są ważne, ale to nie one wygrywają wojnę. W ogóle nie ma problemu.